3rd.
Well, they moved it.
Yeah, it just looked a little different when I did that too.
Hi, there we go.
All right, here's Christian. Good, we're there. All right, let's let him sign on. So we've got everybody but Mary. That's good. Hey, Christian.
Good evening, everyone.
Yep. All right, let's get started. We're in good shape. So this is a regular meeting, 1 week delayed for the Planning Commission, Norwich Planning Commission. So let's jump in. The only thing I would suggest for the agenda, because we have what I think are people in the audience there that are interested in the farmers market topic, if we wanted to swap that with subcommittee process, that may save them from sitting through some of our dirty laundry. So with that suggestion, I'd take a motion for the agenda.
So I make a motion to approve the agenda, but they can talk under public comments, on as next item.
Yeah, well,
We
we have farmers market on the agenda.
Oh, I maybe don't have the current agenda. Was there another agenda posted?
We
after last week?
yes, there were two
I missed
things.
that.
I missed that too.
Okay, well, I can read it out. The two changes, and actually it was good. There were a couple advantages to bumping that a week. One is that we were able to talk to Peggy a little sooner, but also that legal opinion about subcommittees went to the select board and they said, okay, yes, it can be shared, and we put it in that packet. So for those of you who haven't seen it, I can kind of read out the pithy stuff when we get to it. But so the way it reads right now, the agenda is public comment, correspondence, subcommittee process, Norwich Farmers Market, planning and zoning staff, and then the same after that. So Norwich Farmers Market is an item on the agenda. So I'm just proposing swapping items 4 and 5 on the agenda as posted for the 20th.
Yeah, I'm fine with that, even though I don't have the current form. So I'll make that motion.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Oh, all right. Everybody in favor of the agenda? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you. Do we have public comment for items not on the agenda? All right. We're moving. I believe the only correspondence is simply it's interesting, but not urgent. It relates to the village designation and the renewal of village designation. Can somebody just for my knowledge update me on whether we still have an active village designation or not? Do you know, Jeff?
It's my understanding we do not have a village designation,
That's what I thought.
but in that context, we should have a village designation.
Right. So the good news is if we get one, it will be easier to renew every 8 years than they used to be. But other than that, that's the only correspondence.
Well, does that have to be on a future agenda item, since the select board has not, how do I say this, has not solicited or pursued a village designation? So since it's not on our agenda tonight, I'd like to put it on our next agenda to say, hey, let's ask the select board to pursue that.
Okay. I will put that on an agenda item list for an upcoming agenda. Great. All right, so then we jump to the new agenda item, which is farmers market. I can do a quick update and then maybe Peggy can tell us if there's anything I missed. But as people may recall, there was a conversation, I can check my notes, but a number of months back, where the Norwich Farmers Market that's currently on leased land from the co-op has an opportunity to buy the land across the street, which is zoned rural residential. And they came to us 6 months or so ago and said, how can this work? Can we make this work? What are some things to think about? At that point, after a little bit of conversation about possible options, I got notice from Peggy that it was going slow and we were not the tall pole. So we paused that conversation. She came back to me a few days ago and said, okay, maybe we want to check. It's moving along. Let's check and see and get the zoning piece moving along if necessary. So that's why it's on the agenda. And I guess I would ask Peggy for an update to get everybody up to speed where we stand, and then we can talk a little bit about options and how it fits in the big picture.
Thanks. The update is only in that we have made significant progress on negotiating with the sellers. And back in December, we appreciate that you put it on the agenda, but I asked to hold off because we were still too far apart. But in recent weeks, things have come closer together. So it just seemed a good idea, since it's, might take some time to address the zoning issues, to get it back onto the agenda. So that's the update.
Hey, Jan,
Yeah, Jeff.
we have other members in the audience. Can we ask them to identify themselves?
Yeah, sure. So Vince can put it in the minutes. Can we just
Yes.
do a quick go around?
So we can get a pic.
I'm Todd Allen. I'm Peggy Allen's husband.
Okay.
I'm Cam Brown.
Yeah.
Realtor, and I'm here for the Norwich Farmers Market.
Okay. Hi, Cam. All right. So I would open it up to the group. The kinds of things we were talking about previously, and we got an opinion from Kyle looking at the zoning regs and the allowed and conditional uses in rural residential, and there was not an obvious enabling conditional use for a farmer's market. So the question on the table was, is that something where the bylaws could be updated to add a conditional use? And then you have to look at that across the town. You have to say, does that mean a farmer's market as a conditional use in rural residential is legitimate, obviously with DRB review, in other places that are rural residential? We're not spot zoning here. So that's one point. And then the other point that I recall was if the group, the farmer's market that then owns the land, does various ancillary things with the land to make the finances work other than farmer's market once or twice a week, at what point might that trip a switch to being either an ancillary use or a more primary use that has to be taken into account? So that's what I recall from the conversation. What are other people's either recollections or thoughts on this?
Don't we have a couple of different designation in rural residential? I mean, it's like a 1 and a 2 or something like to that effect. I'm trying to remember.
In rural?
Yeah,
Huh.
I thought we had rural residential, and then rural residential 1 and rural residential 2.
I thought that was in the village. There were two different villages. Does anybody clarify that?
Section 201 of Article 2 says, let's see, rural residential, village residential 1, village residential 2, village business, commercial and industrial districts.
Yeah, so it's the village residential has a 1 and 2.
Okay,
And rural is singular, I think.
okay, and what is that particular place, that particular lot?
Is RR is just straight rural residential.
Now, I haven't been on the planning commission when we actually started changing or designating or anything like that, the zones. What does it take to change a zone? I mean, should that zone be rural residential to begin with?
Okay, Jeff?
Yeah, the planning commission went through a pretty exhaustive planning process a few years back about rezoning, including this parcel. It involved a whole bunch of public meetings and then a development of changes to the zoning ordinance, which we then were to offer to the select board, which would then have to go through more or less the same paradigm. And when Peggy was in last time, I basically, with Peter Raymond on as her attorney, I basically said, hey, look, we're a couple of years out if we're going to go through this entire process. So if there's a proposal to facilitate or approach rezoning, let's hear it. Let's have it submitted formally, and then let's contemplate it accordingly, and then go through the entire public notification process, and then flip it to the select board so they can go through the public notification process.
So is there, I guess for discussion right now, I'm curious on to hear people's thoughts on just the choice between changing not changing designations of what district that parcel is in, just changing the allowed use in the rural residential to include something, farmer's market with a definition. I understand that the same or the, similar process, change the bylaws, select board, public hearing, that whole arc needs to happen for that. But do people have a feeling one way or the other for changing the type of parcel versus changing a conditional use in RR?
Jan, this is a bit unprecedented for me. I've never, since 1992 on this commission, and been involved in anything like this. So if there's a request, submit it to us in writing so we can evaluate it. This informal context, I have no idea what may be proposed, how it may affect zoning, et cetera. So let's have something formally presented, and once it's formally presented, let's undertake it on an agenda item.
Well, I think, I would like to be able to get a little bit of the feel for the group for how people feel about the option. I understand, but let me just propose if the proposal was, if we got a formal statement that said, I think Peggy's coming and saying, she's got a formal proposal. She's saying, if we want to make this happen, and to my mind, there would be a great deal of support in the town for making it happen. What are some options? She's asking for something like a brainstorming from the group rather than here's my formal proposal, thumbs up or thumbs down. So I'm trying to accommodate that by getting some input from the group early.
Yeah, the planning commission had previously suggested this parcel was among the most eligible for affordable housing and housing, given the housing shortage that we face not only in this town, but in this region. So that's on the record, frankly. So I guess from my standpoint, I'd have to understand what the benefits of whatever the proposal is with respect to our zoning, what the planning commission has previously contemplated, and go beyond. What do you think? I love the notion of a farmer's market. I also love the notion of affordable housing.
Okay, Vince, did you have something?
I was just gonna, I guess, explore your two options that you brought up. I think if I think conditional use makes the most sense if the idea is to basically pick up the farmer's market as it is and move it across the street. If there's more to it than that down the road, I think that's going to cause a lot of unnecessary constraints and unknowns for those who are running the farmer's market. If there could be like we talked about, building a building for the winter market or in an event space, kind of gets a little hazier to what a farmer's market is as far as a blanket statement for the rest of the town. So I think even though it might be a more labor intensive effort, it might make more sense in the long term.
Mm-hmm. Ernie?
Yeah, keeping in mind what you said about the effect it could have. I mean, if most of the town is zone RR. So basically, if we permit it, if we just simply say that, a farmer's market fits within rural residential, within rural residential zoning, it's going to be all over the town. It's going to be everywhere. It could potentially be everywhere. Let me say that. I forgot. It's not that it would be everywhere, but any farmer's market could be put anywhere, and anything like a farmer's market could be put anywhere in the town. And I'm not 100% sure that that's an outcome we want. That I mean, because farmer's market's a great thing to have in the town, and that particular site, maybe that's appropriate for it too. I can't say, but I think I'm with Jeff. I think farmer's market's a great idea.
Christian?
Can I just get clear? Are we looking at I just want to make sure I'm reading the right zoning law bylaw. Is it the 2009 that were amended in 2013? Is that the right
Yeah, that's
on the website?
That's
So
the current.
If that's the current, I will say that under, like, it does specifically call out cultural facilities as conditional use,
Cultural, yeah.
which
When
using
we look-
community centers and so we're kind of in that vague area, or farmers markets. Like, to
It
me,
calls
seems
out
like-
agricultural use, and it calls out something like that, some cultural facilities. And Kyle's read was that it wasn't, you sort of knock it out of the park clear that a farmer's market fit within one of those. It may, and you may, but the point is, if what they need is as little uncertainty as possible, then if they wait 2 years to get everything else figured out and they go to do a conditional use permit at the DRB as a cultural facility, and the DRB says, nah, I don't think so, then it's fuzzier than they would like. Am I right in saying that if anything that's listed as a conditional use means it goes in front of the DRB? So to your point, Ernie, and I was saying this to Amy as we were talking about this, it said, okay, we're in rural residential, what's to stop my neighbor from putting in a farmer's market? And the answer is the DRB would look and say, okay, what's the traffic going to be? What's the parking going to go to? And so on. And our neighbor would fail various criteria, and the DRB would say, no, that's a dumb idea. You don't get your conditional use. That's part of the whole picture as I see it in terms of
Well, the
that
way
strategy. Yeah, Ernie?
the way we would have to do things is we would have to rewrite the bylaws that govern rural residential, what's conditional and what's permitted. And we would add, if we add it so that we can avoid spot zoning, we have to then, if we say that even regardless of how whether it's permit, it can get a permit. If we say that it can go into rural residential, it can go, then the DRB wouldn't really be, there wouldn't be any opposition, realistic opposition to it, because we've given it permission. If it's in rural residential,
If it's permitted use, right?
If it's permitted,
permitted use, it's Kyle's or the ZA's call if it meets that. But if it's conditional, it goes DRB. Is that not right?
right, but if it's conditional, if it fits the conditions, condition is still defined. It's not entire. It's not really what the DRB does is somebody's going for a conditional use, the DRB looks and sees if whatever the project is meets all the things that allow a conditional use, and that would be, because most businesses have, most of them, there's a conditional use for almost everything in all the zones, but farmers market, let's say we come up farmers markets, they got to meet certain criteria, but all somebody has to do is, once you have the conditional that written into the bylaws, all they have to do is follow the law and anywhere they want it. So you then get back to the position where as long as they meet the conditions, the DRB has to give them a conditional use permit, has to allow it. And that's the way it works. And if you don't, it's a court battle.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and the DRB does have to, the DRB's thing is, since it's quasi-judicial, is to interpret, somebody says that this is what it'll do, this is what it'll do, this is what it'll do, this is, and we also have our experience, just like judges do, to say, well, that really doesn't correspond to what you're saying it's going to do, and what we see do elsewhere doesn't really correspond. Well, yes or no is based on stuff like that too. But the point is that, when you start laying rules out like in bylaws and stuff, it's pretty straightforward that people, all they do is follow the rules and they get what they want.
Yeah. Christian, then Jeff.
Yeah, I would just say section 5.04 in the zoning laws makes it pretty clear that's a conditional use policy, and I think it'd be worth people reviewing, because I think, to your point, it does specifically state like parking, traffic, environmental impacts, character of the neighborhood. So like I wouldn't be too concerned that the DRB would have to grant and greenlight any single approval for any competing farmers market anywhere in town. Like, I think it's a pretty unique character there. I mean, it's directly across the street. It's borders commercial space. Like, I think it's a pretty unique place we're talking about, and I don't think the DRB would then have to greenlight any competing interest in farmers market.
Mm-hmm. Jeff.
Yeah, if you're polling folks, you probably ought to ask Bob for his opinion first, then come back to me.
Oh, I guess what I'd say, I mean, this is kind of where my inexperience would come through. I mean, we're talking about two things that we value a bit, especially with what Jeff brings up of something that's potential for housing is, as we've gone through an exercise that hasn't ended as well as, or is hit a bit of a roadblock with the housing, that the places we have seem few and far between. And that's something that is a priority in the region. But on the other hand, everybody loves the farmers market. I mean, my assumption is that across the street is zoned, I should have relooked at the map, but I'm assuming that the co-op property is commercial currently, commercial, and across the street is rural residential.
Correct.
I mean, I don't know. In my blue sky daydreaming, as much as people may oppose rezoning and whatever, a one-for-one swap of would it be more valuable to the co-op to have a tract of land that could be sold as rural residential? I don't know, and then have a commercial lot, but that's just, I mean, I'm sure everyone could tell me 1,000 ways that sounds ridiculous, but
you would still have to go through all the hurdles.
And there's a significant hurdle to that. I mean, I guess I'm still trying to balance in my mind the two things that we all want. So I have a hard time figuring out where it falls.
Yeah. Jeff?
Yeah. And so I completely agree with Ernie and completely disagree with Christian with respect to precedent. So if we're going to open the town up, that's what we're going to do. If we say in our zoning districts, here's what you get. So until we vet that, understand what it is, put it on the agenda. Let's work through that process. I think what Christian said is not true with respect to any way with respect to binding the DRB going forward. If you set a precedent in the RR zoning district, we're going to open everything up.
Yep.
Not that I have a problem with that. Having said that, we've been talking about zoning districts. We've been talking about how we look at changing zoning throughout the town, where the planning commission had previously had multiple zoning districts for middle income, multifamily, yada, yada, all based on or predicated on where the infrastructure is. I'm going to submit to folks here based on the planning commission's past work. This is the most highly developable property in this town. The town that's on the table right now because of its proximity to the town of Hartford with respect to water and sewer. So until we go through our previous discussions with respect to what does this planning commission want to suggest to the select board for new zoning districts, this is way premature in terms of our consideration.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments at this point? I mean, I agree, just speaking, my personal feeling, I guess I'm see both sides in the sense that, yes, obviously the farmer's market having more space is very valuable to the town, it's very valuable to the region essentially. And what Jeff just said is true, and I don't think, we certainly can't do anything in isolation, and that's my concern, and that's my concern around time frame, because even were we to know what we wanted to do for bylaws changes for this issue, then I would be asking the group, what other changes do we want to bundle with this to go through the whole hearing process? We may have solar siting ones that roll out of the plan. We may have things to get current with state law. We may have, we have a standing request from the listers to change something from, a public comment relative to leaf blowers. I mean, we could bundle 6 or 7 zoning changes together and say, now we all go through the process. That question is still on the table, regardless of the content of what we might adjust for this issue. So it's not simple. I would ask, so Peggy, can you give some feeling for time frame? Because if this is something where you said we need dead certainty in 3 months, then I'd think we would shake our heads and say that's out of the question. Where do you stand in the big picture of this timing?
Well, the clock is ticking. Let me also back up and clarify why it is so essential that the farmers market move. I know that that's not relevant to the issues that you've described, but I at least want those issues on the table. One is that we have a significant parking issue that is a safety issue. People are choosing not to come to the farmers market because the traffic and the safety of the way the parking is laid out is now critical. The other is that there are wetland issues right along Route 5 that leave vendors along Route 5, up to their ankles sometimes when it's that wet. And the other that we all know is that Tracy Hall is insufficient for a winter market. It doesn't have the parking and it doesn't have the space. The reality in the Upper Valley is that the farmers of the Upper Valley absolutely count on the farmers market. It is vital to their sustainability, and as climate changes, they need to know that as they invest in USDA hoops and whatnot, that they've got the market where they can count on the income. So there's a real pressure to try and find a permanent, long-term solution for the farmers market, not just for the farmers market, but the impact that it has on this region's agriculture. So that's the if you will, the heart and soul of this. I understand the affordable housing issue. What we all know is affordable housing issues have been looked at quite closely on this property and have failed to materialize. This property has been on the market for more than 10 years and nothing has been able to develop on that property. And there's a variety of reasons why not, including septic, etc. What I will throw out there though, is that if the farmers market could move across the street, it is feasible to imagine with the zoning that currently exists on the footprint of the current farmers market and with the cooperation of the co-op to develop that for affordable housing. Right now, we all know there's no way Hartford is going to bring sewer and water to the lot that we're discussing. Is there a possibility that they would bring it to the lot that's adjacent to Fox? I don't know.
Mhm.
And I understand I am not here to bundle the issues because I am solely here for the farmer's market, but I am just throwing that out. And Jeff, so does that help?
Yeah, just one point. So is there a
A timing issue?
timing?
There's absolutely a timing issue because there is another player interested in the property. So that's one factor. And the sellers have made it very clear they're not going to give us a long running room to go through all the issues. And I understand that. And I'll be honest with you, no one expects the rural residential zoning issue to be resolved in 3 months. But I won't within the PNS be able to, I won't have 2 years.
Okay, that's helpful. Jeff?
Yeah, Jan, as a point of order, I completely disagree with this discussion. This is I'm not going to refute what Peggy has said, even though I think what she said is not entirely factual or even largely factual, nor do I think the Planning Commission should be contemplating what she's just said to pressure us to consider zoning changes. So fundamentally, the question is, what is the highest and best use of properties in this community in concert with our past discussions, our recent discussions, and our ongoing discussions with what should we consider for zoning? How do we want to contemplate uses throughout the town? Sitting here today, if I pick up the farmer's market on one side of Route 5 and move it to the other side of Route 5, nothing changes. Nothing changes. I'm not going to sit here and suggest how things on the east side of Route 5 might be ameliorated like I wouldn't on the west side of Route 5. This is the wrong forum from this. Right now, we should be talking about what does the Planning Commission want to do with respect to parcels, and in this case, probably the most highly developable parcel in the town with respect to the possibility for housing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what would the group like to do as a next step here? Do you want to just simply expand this into the kind of conversations we have been having around overall planning and zoning questions, or ask the applicant for a more specific proposal?
Point of order, there is no applicant. So at the end of the day.
Understood. The parties, the involved parties, understood.
Yeah, so let's just get back to our business. So if there's anything else on this topic, we're going to take up zoning in a later agenda item. Zoning bylaws to support housing, whatever agenda item that has become. That's what we've been talking about.
Okay, I'm fine with parking that right now. I just will have it as a placeholder to when we have it as a zoning bylaw topic as we open that up to include this in the discussion. All right, any other comments on that topic? All right, thank you. Thank you, Peggy. We will, you'll be seeing what we do as we go along. That's maybe the best we can do at this point. But I would say that as chair, my goal is to, over the course of what will be a number of months, identify a bundle of zoning changes that we can put through the process. I don't want to keep talking about what we might change and never, or expanding the scope of what might be changed so that it never converges on something that can be fed into the pipeline. But it will be a number of months of discussion just to carve out the first bundle. Okay? All right. Next item on the agenda is subcommittee process as it relates to the ongoing conversation with the select board. So especially because some people may not have seen the revised packet, I can give us a little background here. So as you recall, we had the conversation was who is legally empowered to create and appoint members to subcommittees. And there was an initial legal opinion let me just look at my notes, 614. There was a legal opinion which stated that subcommittee members needed to be appointed by the select board if they were not already members of the Conservation Commission, the Planning Commission, and so forth. That led into a process where the select board has worked to officially appoint, and it ended up being the Emerald Ash Borer Committee subcommittee, the Milk Fry, and the Affordable Housing Subcommittee to kind of clean up those standing committees and have them be appointed by the select board. We submitted everything we were supposed to submit. For us, it's just the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, so I'll just talk about that. Unfortunately, communication between me and Pam Smith got a little, we dropped the ball in terms of who was supposed to get it in the packet. So the Affordable Housing Subcommittee information was submitted on time, but it didn't get to the select board to vote on it last week. They will vote on those appointments on the 28th. They did vote as a whole on those other two committees, just as an example. They listed the members, the terms, and they appointed them. What that then left as a topic on this was for a group exactly like our solar siting subcommittee, which is a subcommittee whose only members are members of the Planning Commission. Does that committee need to be created by, or those members somehow appointed by, the select board? And that was brought up as the opinion of at least one select board member at the next to last meeting, 2 meetings ago. We asked for a specific legal opinion that answered that question. If the PC could the PC make a subcommittee of its own members? The legal opinion that answered that question, which is in the most recent packet, and you can pull it up and look at it, but I will summarize it so we can continue. Says that we have the right to create a working group. Robert's Rules of Order enables a working group, and we can create a group of our own members, a subgroup that is a working group on a given topic. That is enabled. If it is a subcommittee that includes members from outside our group and is a formal advisory committee as defined in the statutes, then the select board has to be involved. So as that stands, my proposal would be the solar siting subcommittee is a perfect example of a working group that we created for a specific task, and therefore is enabled and doesn't need any further select board involvement to appoint or anoint it. So that's where it stands in my mind. Any questions on just the background? So everybody's starting from the same place?
Jan, I'm not sure I have a question. I would say that I haven't met another attorney in another firm that shares the opinions that have been offered. I don't really care. If the select board wants to appoint its own subcommittees, that's fine. So to that end, my assumption is that going forward, this is going to be my objection to what was presented with the Affordable Housing Subcommittee. I don't see the Affordable Housing Subcommittee or any of these other committees answerable to anybody or any entity other than the select board. This is a select board paradigm.
It is, I'm hearing background noise. Is that in the big room there?
Yeah, we've got folks talking in the hallway. Sorry. It's not a big deal.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I think that it came up, and if you want to, you can look at the video of the select board meeting, but the wording, it was discussed a little bit where they, for example, for the Mill-Fry group, they worded it as to appoint members to this advisory committee under the Conservation Commission, as the way it was phrased. Now, to me, that is, and actually Roger brought it up also. He's like, well, what does that mean? Are we creating a group that is a select board group, or is it under this other group and we're just appointing members? So it was not well defined. I did talk to Jeff Lubell a little bit about it to say, you know, if the Affordable Housing Subcommittee is officially appointed, and the charter, 20-year-old charter that we dug up and sent into the select board with the packet, you know, the charter was approved by the select board. And so, but if the Affordable Housing Subcommittee is an official advisory committee of the select board, then I think what Jeff's saying is that, you know, if they have a grant proposal like they did to be reviewed and submitted and a public hearing to be held, it's going to feed right into the select board. Is that, I mean, what do people think? Is that a concern? Does that matter? Is that how you see it?
Yeah, and none of this makes any sense to me. I've only been doing this for 40 years. I haven't met another attorney that shares the view that this firm has offered the select board. That said, great, all these subcommittees can answer the select board. I have no issues with that. And I fully support the select board appointing the ash borer, whatever the trails, whatever, you know, the affordable, they can all answer the select board. I think that's great. If that's what the select board wants to do, they're just going to take responsibility for it.
So do we have, specific to the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, do we have any thoughts about our relationship to that group? Do we?
Yeah, only to the extent that, you know, the select board now solicits our input or says to the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, hey, think about what the Planning Commission thinks.
Other thoughts? Ernie?
I'm thinking that sort of what I'm agreeing with Jeff. I'm just trying to think if there's any other ways to look at it. I'm trying to figure out what role. I mean, we're the Planning Commission, so we're supposed to. I mean, we have to take into account, you know, environmental, land use, economic, all kinds of different things. And the Housing Committee only is. It seems to be tasked, the way I look at it after listening to it for a few years now, seems to be tasked with simply getting affordable housing done. So we need to hear what I think our role then becomes when it comes to affordable housing is facilitating any kind of legal or bylaws changes to make it happen when they find out and figure out what they want to do. And I'm just trying to figure out what our role is, what we have to say about affordable housing from here on out. And I think when I was looking at the affordable housing bylaws. There's not earlier, the old ones that I was reading from 2003, and I was thinking that's not really a zoning, that's not really a planning effort anyways. It is, it's got a single goal to make something happen, which is different from what we do. So all we need to do is hear what the affordable housing people need. And I think the fact that it was housed in the planning commission all this time may have, kind of doesn't make any sense when I look at it, even look at it back, retroactively. But now that we have this clarity of, being law and all that sort of stuff, I think, they have to know what their job is, was just to sit. Their job is not to rewrite the zoning laws. That's our job. We have to just listen to what they need and see how it's going to fit into what we deem to be the appropriate planning efforts. I mean, and see, and the only reason we have to think of affordable housing is how does that impact, our planning bylaws, our zoning and subdivision bylaws, and our town plan.
Okay. Vince?
So going forward, just hypothetically, let's say we wanted to, so you're saying any formal advisory committee is answering to the select board now, if we want to, is that what am I understanding this correctly? It's part of the select board?
My understanding is that the select board has read their legal opinion, and it says that if a formal advisory committee is deemed necessary in the town of Norwich, that its members it is created by and its members appointed by the select board. That's their reading of the legal opinion, and that's where they're acting. So if the select board were to say, as we did before, we really think multimodal, for example, I think I would say that's a working group of the planning commission. But specifically that means you cannot, the planning commission could not appoint members of either the solar siting or some other committee that were not already PC members. That's the distinction. Now, the solar siting, we haven't, and it works fine. There are plenty of people that come and participate. We just say the 3 members are the 3 PC members. But if we wanted to make another working group for any reason, it could only be made up of the official members would be PC members.
Okay, so that makes sense. So it's just, there's no incentive to include members of the public officially for us, because we would need to divest ourselves from the planning commission and be at the mercy of the select board, basically. So it makes more sense for basically going forward. We're just going to be doing working groups is the headline, which seems.
That's what I read when I read the opinion. I was like, okay, we have an avenue here that we won't have to knock heads with the select board to do working groups. I think it's overly constrained, and it does limit public participation, but that is clearly the way the select board is reading those opinions. I think, and then I'll go to Jeff, but I think the one to picture, for example, it's a good example, is say capital planning. If you were going to have a real capital planning advisory group that had select board membership, town staff membership, and a planning commission involvement, it would, under this framework, very logically and necessarily be a select board created advisory commission for capital planning, and they could ask the PC for members or whatever, but it would be their entity.
Okay.
Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I think Vince said, okay, that makes sense. The only thing that Vince said that I disagree with is it makes sense. This doesn't make, doesn't make any sense. So I mean, I think going forward, you know, to the extent we want to do a capital advisory committee, we're going to say to the select board, this is what we want to do. And here are the 6 people you need to appoint that are now going to answer to you. So we're just going to keep overloading the select board with subcommittees, given the bent that they're on, until we get new select board members that actually understand the law. I'm okay with that. If the select board wants to spread their peanut butter over lots of bread, I'm fine with that. You know, run it. I think with respect to Ernie's comment about affordable housing and zoning, we still have the charge. Same with capital planning or CIP stuff, capital improvement plans, infrastructure. We have a responsibility. So how are we going to do it? No matter how much we get handicapped or undermined. Having said that, you know, the public can still attend, can still join, you know, still join what we're doing. We just got to prioritize what we want to do. I think where we were previously, we were sort of, how do I say this? We were exuberant, if I may, about how we address zoning, the zoning districts, you know, what the housing changes may be, et cetera. Regardless of what anyone else does, any subcommittee of the select board, you know, I think we should tackle that, for instance. CIP stuff where we were before, I think or capital improvement considerations, I think we should tackle that. We have discussed the notion of, frankly, the select board appointing its own committee with a couple of planning commission members to do the whole capital planning effort, which makes sense. And you know what, if the select board doesn't do that, we still have the same responsibility.
Right. Right. Agreed. I think in the short term for our activities, we can work within this constraint, and that is the solar siting subcommittee is the one active working group. You can still call it a subcommittee, but it's a working group that has members that are appointed, and the public is encouraged to attend. Fine. That the quorum is 2 out of 3 and we can't have more members. Fine. We can work with that. I think there are 2 other things just to put on the table. We don't have to deal with them now, but it's in this process category. If you remember, there was a document, a select board reporting process where it's, as far as I know, a standing policy that just simply isn't being followed, which is every one of these groups is supposed to quarterly submit an update of its projects and processes and what it's doing and when it's going to be done with them. And it's explicitly not allowed for it to just be read the minutes. It's supposed to be a separate report. That's the standing policy. So nobody is doing it as far as I know, and it's a make work project, but that is something to keep in mind. And if we wanted to play by the letter of the law, we would do those. The select board has said they are going to revisit that policy as part of this whole handbook process. So just keep that in mind. I have received an official request from the select board to fill out the handbook statements, which are basically who's the planning commission, the people, their terms, enabling statute, which is pretty straightforward, and then any subgroups and subcommittees. So it's pretty straightforward. I can fill it out as long as this group says I'm authorized to do so.
Yeah, but your job got easier, Jan. You don't have to do anything. We just have 7. We have 7 planning commission members that probably have to do a quarterly report. We're done.
and one working group, and the
That's
minutes are required by the OML, and we're following the rules. The other one I would put out there is the just, and I don't want to dig this up too much, but we have a standing subcommittee process that we adopted some number of months back, which explicitly says we can appoint members of the public, and our target membership is 5, and so forth. So at this point, that conflicts with what looks like subcommittee, select board policy. I would propose that we let the dust settle on their whole handbook activity before we pull up any of our processes that might conflict. But I'm open to discussion.
Agreed.
I would point out, just to close this, there's an interesting, I saw the Energy Committee had submitted their charter to the select board as part of this gathering of information on groups. And at the bottom of the charter of the Energy Committee, it very explicitly says that the minutes need to be written with significant, with sufficient detail to really understand the activities, not just the OML basics. And if you have something like that about the minutes, then to me that makes way more sense than, separate quarterly reports for the select board, but we'll park that for now. Okay. So as far as I know, on the 28th, the select board will, with a stroke of a pen, appoint the Affordable Housing Subcommittee. And then Jeff Lubell proposed some changes to their charter, which will go back to the select board for discussion. And we will hear about it, as anyone else does, by reading their minutes. Okay. Next item.
Sorry, before we completely leave that,
Sure.
I guess my question is then, if we want to keep things moving on capital planning and that sort of thing,
Yep.
Our route is to, instead of like sitting on our thumbs and waiting for the select board to get to the committee, we would like petition them to form a committee that could potentially have, or suggest it, or
I would simply say to the planning commission, and it's an agenda item in about 4 items, to say, what do we want to do relative to capital planning? And if it stretches outside the boundaries of this group, then we can talk about how to deal with that. But I think we will have some constructive conversation within this group before we have to stretch out past it.
Okay, very good.
Planning and zoning staff, next thing on the agenda, and interestingly enough, and we put this on the agenda specifically because the last round we made 2 offers and didn't get anywhere, and we were going round and round, and I think there was a desire to open it up for discussion. What has happened since in the last week and a half, especially, is we did another round of advertising. I know they used different venues for advertising. I'm not sure what they were, but they were quite successful, actually. We've got 7 applications for the same job description that's been on the table for 18 months, 4 of which we deemed worth interviewing. That's happening this week and next week. We did an interview this morning. We have a couple more on Thursday, and we're looking to fit in. And these are people that are, at least in my mind and on paper, qualified and certainly worth talking to. So at this point, I would kind of ask the group to say, okay, let's run this around the flagpole one more time and see if we can get something, and then look at it. Ernie?
I think when it comes time for us to look at somebody to nominate, I think I'd like to have more information than just reading their resume. I'd like them to be present, and I'd like to be able to speak to them as well. At least, I can't speak for anyone else, but I think the planning commission should be allowed to actually interview these people too. At least the ones that are sort of haven't been eliminated outright.
What do other people think?
No, go ahead, Vince.
So I'm fine with Jan's opinion. I think that's enough information for me based off of his history and his recommendation from previous candidates.
Jeff?
Yeah, given the role of the planning commission in previous years, I'm on the same page with Ernie with respect to wanting to interact with applicants if we're going to actually consider them. And help me frame this as positively as possible. Given our experience in recent years, I'm even more in agreement with what Ernie is suggesting. Jan, this has nothing to do with you whatsoever. I trust you, appreciate you, but
Yeah. Same here.
So what do other people think? It adds another twist in the process that will not be straightforward necessarily. So I'd like to hear what Christian and Bob think.
I'm comfortable with you being the representative of us, but I know this has come up multiple times or at least in the last round or two. I thought we were okay before with you and Jack being the representatives interviewing, but I guess I misunderstood that before. Now that are you picturing it more than like a Zoom call with 7 people instead of 2, or are they in-person meetings that you're involved in, I guess?
Right now we're doing, and what we did to get the last 2 candidates were Zoom interviews. We just did 40 minutes with a guy this morning, and that was me, Miranda, and Brennan, because Jack's no longer there, and the DRB did not request to replace Jack on that activity. So as it stands now, the cycle we went through before was we would narrow it down, and then we would come to this group with, to Ernie's point, the writings and my reporting of the interview, and this group would make a statement that, as we did with the last 2, these 2 we believe are above the threshold of acceptable and for the position, and leave the final details to the hiring manager. Christian, what do you think?
The process that worked a month ago works for me, so I'm happy to take your input and meet as a special session and review and take your input into consideration.
Okay, Jeff?
yeah, just for the record, I have not agreed with the town manager's selection of 1 or 2 folks out of the community for some years, based on experience or knowledge. The one exception I would say was with respect to Jack Cannon and Jan, because of their experience and their knowledge. So even though I disagreed with the process, I was pretty comfortable with Jack and Jan, given their backgrounds. I think as one who's been in business for 40 years, this doesn't comport with anything that I've ever done in terms of hiring. Again, this has nothing to do with Jan, but right now, to me, the qualified person in this process, the closest we have to a qualified person is Jan. This is such a critical issue that I'm going to continue to express my concern.
Okay, well, what I'd like to do, and what I'm hearing is, they're a strong, but at this point, minority's desire to really formally say we need to interview them. But at this point, I don't want to preclude, we've got 4 candidates we're interviewing. That may come down to nothing. It may come down to 1 or 2. Let's go through the process as we have before. If when we're in executive session, looking at what the type of information we reviewed before, that a greater part of the group says, I want to talk to this person, then we can decide that. But right now, the next steps would be similar to what we've done before until we get there. Jeff?
Yeah, I would like to applaud the way you just dealt with that, Jan. Nice job. I mean it.
Okay, thank you. So I'm thrilled. I don't know where the heck they advertised, but she got 7 of them, and several of them are have planning and zoning administrators within Vermont towns, things like that. So let's see where we get to. All right, thank you. So now to get kind of into the meat of what we should be doing, and this is kind of the bigger question to the group. So with the next three agenda items, zoning bylaws to support housing, zoning bylaws, lot consolidation, which is a kind of more specific thing, more merger, and then capital planning. That's the meat, the meat of our work, and I want us to kind of work on it in a constructive fashion. Just as I see it, and Bob and Jeff can chime in on the first one. So the one that we have, item 7, zoning bylaws to support housing. In my mind, we have clearly the affordable housing is at the top of people's list. Solar siting is another one. We have an active thing going on with solar siting. Great, that'll do the work. The specific topic under housing, and I left it general in the agenda item, but the specific topic was, are there things, Jeff has made comments before around infill within the village, and that our zoning has specific limitations for whether it's ADUs or multiple units in a single unit. I know the state law has changed relative to that sort of thing. So in my mind, the specific question, or a specific question on the table, is what zoning bylaws changes could we make that would make infill housing in the village more possible? Now, that obviously is a very limited slice of the whole topic, but I know Bob and Jeff have been trying to catch up and talk about it, and I don't know where you got to in the last week. Jeff, and then Bob?
Yeah, Jan, I'd like to suggest, because we're meeting once a month now, I'd like to suggest we do a second meeting that focuses on just this, and we invite the Affordable Housing Subcommittee at the same time. I have a lot to say about this, but if we're going to do, another meeting, or if the infill meeting for a time or two is this with others invited, I'll hold my tongue because I can talk.
Is it? I hear you, and I think it's a good proposal, because clearly the Affordable Housing Subcommittee should be involved. There's no reason that we can't just invite them to a full meeting. Is it a kind of a good choice of all the topics we might cover, or even all the affordable housing related topics? Is this question of zoning bylaws as they might limit options for infill housing, is that a good use of our time? Is that a good focal topic for this group? Jeff?
I think we've had what we do with the zoning ordinance and the subdivision regulations on the table for years. I think this is a paramount topic for us.
Okay. Other people? Christian?
I agree totally with Jeff. This is my 5th month, I believe, and to me, the number one priority area. It's something of concern in the town. I've heard it come up every meeting. And I totally agree that the best way to make actual headway with anything is to set aside specific time with a very focused set of parameters. So I totally agree with Jeff.
Okay. Bob?
I mean, I agree. I'd love to do a deep dive on it particularly. And if if we could get to the point where there are specific, notable changes or suggestions that would get, either sent to you in correspondence or whatever, so we can all get up to speed, on all the particulars, so that kind of everyone's seeing what we might discuss. That would be great.
Yeah, that was my next question. I mean, if we take a proposal, if we say, okay, let's plan a dedicated meeting, or certainly a dedicated large chunk of a meeting with the Affordable Housing Subcommittee invited, what is useful preparation and homework to be done for that meeting? Is there, clearly I can identify one, which is just get somebody to raise their hand and say, what are the changes in state regulation that are now on the books that need to be understood by people as we talk about this? That's just one piece of background information, and there, I'm sure, are others. It'd be good to be prepared. We'd make the best use of the time. Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I don't know how to say this, but, whether it's Jeff Lubell, me, Bob, whomever, I could see submitting ideas about how this may be amalgamated. It's not going to happen in one meeting. It may be a series of meetings, et cetera, but rather than offering that here, I mean, I was just talking to Jeff Lubell over the weekend about, for instance, multifamily. What is multifamily? How do we increase density? What are the soil site conditions that relate to that? The notion of class 1, 2, 3 lots as a function of what utilities are, that sort of thing. And so what I infer is folks, around the table here are going, what are you talking about? So it's going to be a process of learning, what is it? How do we deal with it? What is it we want to achieve? And so maybe if we said, a couple of weeks from now, we're going to meet and do this, and I'm being facetious because I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe we put a bunch of items on the table, and then during that meeting, folks can say, well, what does that mean? Right now, when we look at the RR district, it's 2-acre zoning basically, which decreases the further out from town you go. But there's an opportunity for duplex. So arguably it's 1-acre zoning, but it decreases the further out you go. What does that mean for a structure downtown? Can you do apartments in that structure? That's not in our, it's not in our zoning right now. And what would that mean, for instance? What governs that? What restricts that? Rather than ramble, because I can ramble, I'll let you.
Well, is it, so I hear you, and I think it would be, it's clearly multiple sessions. And what may be useful as a means of preparation is whether it's you or other members or people from the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, essentially create a detailed agenda that says, we are going to touch on state regulations. We're going to touch on density requirements. We're going to touch on septic infrastructure and, various things that you listed that we don't know what they mean, but we could end up with easily a 10 or 15 bullet list. It's our agenda. We'll step through it, do some background, and decide, how to go forward, and then recognize it's going to take us multiple sessions.
Don, you and Jeff Lubell and I can do that without any OML violations, just go back and forth. And by the way, I don't want to preclude or exclude anyone. That's not my intent. But just to kick it off, if the Planning Commission wants to do this, which kind of excites me, then let's tee it up and then go back and forth about items.
Christian?
Yeah, I agree. I totally, if you can get a list of things and terms and things that to be discussed, like, I don't know about speaking for others, like, I'm happy to do the homework and spend some time with it, digesting it
Yeah.
beforehand and come with questions for those on the subcommittee. So I think it would be helpful to have at least some of that information beforehand.
Okay, so that, and let me put something, Ernie, do you want to say something?
No, you first, and then I
Well, I
just
just
have some.
wanted to frame a plan here. So we're a week late on a normal, so if our next meeting, regular time is gonna be 3 weeks from now. Okay, so if we propose, the first hour of that meeting or some significant chunk of dedicated time with the Affordable Housing Subcommittee invited, and then this group charges me and the Jeffs to get together and put out a list of topics and basically topics that would be on a detailed agenda. If we can get that out, not just at the last minute, 5 days before, but a little bit sooner than that, then that will give individual members, when they see it in the packet, time to dig around and look up some stuff and frame some questions. And it's perfectly legitimate. Flip side would be if people have specific questions or ideas and want to put them into the hopper, then, by all means, we'll end up with a packet that has that list of topics that we generate. It might be a list of questions from other people. And then we'll have a block of time, and that will be the kickoff of what we assume to be multiple sessions. Jeff, and then Ernie.
Yeah, as I've been striving to help folks understand terminology in a sense on the Affordable Housing Committee side and subcommittee side and other things, we have local zoning in Hanover, Lebanon, Hartford that are easy things to look at. So I would say, sitting here, if you looked at the Lebanon zoning ordinance, look at the R1 district. Lebanon zoning R1, I don't remember which page, but it's 48 or something like that. If I'm right, that'd be crazy. And then Hanover for the SR zoning district. So when you look at Lebanon's R1, Hanover's SR, you're going to see permitted in New Hampshire, it's special exception as opposed to conditional use, but understand what those uses are, what it means in terms of how they're looking at all the, so you have R1, R2, R3, in Lebanon, RL1, RL2, RL3. Hanover has different, but same stuff. And then anyway, take a look at those two and ask yourself, how does that differ from Norwich?
Mm-hmm.
If you can understand just those two elements, I mean, I don't want to get too carried away. I'm not advocating or promoting another zoning ordinance, but take a look at those zoning ordinances. Hartford has something similar, but to me, those two districts are easier to read and understand what we're talking about.
Okay. No, that's the kind of thing I think that's very helpful for those of us who want to do a little homework and help the discussion go faster. Ernie?
Yeah, I just want a little clarification. We are talking basically about, not basically, we are talking about when you say zoning laws to support housing, we're talking about supporting affordable housing, correct?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
I mean, we're talking, I think that's going to be one element. We're talking, if you say, does making ADUs in the village district easier to permit or whatever, does that count as supporting affordable housing? I mean, arguably, I would say yes, but not exclusively. It's also promoting growth in those zones, if you want to call it that way. Jeff?
Well, that's kind of my concern is what are we promoting? Because I mean, we don't need more expensive housing. We really, we don't really need to promote just housing in general. I mean, the town will grow no matter what, but it's not, we don't need to force growth. And the reason I bring that up is because there's this, you included in the packet, the Affordable Housing Committee bylaws. And its mission was in part, the way it reads to me, and I could be reading it, misreading it, but the very first thing they said is creating a perpetual pool of affordable of approximately 20% or more affordable housing in Norwich, which basically the way I read that means making sure we increase at least one section of housing to be 20% of the population of 20%. And that means increasing, let's say whatever our number of houses are, our number of homes are, increasing that number by 20%. That's forcing growth on the town, not letting it happen. There's a difference. And when you do stuff like that, that causes vast changes in what it costs to run the town. I mean, you basically, at some point, you're actually making the town so expensive, you're going to force people out of the town, some people out of the town, mostly the people that need affordable housing. You know, and there's no way of controlling that really, because affordable housing that comes into this town is still going to be valued the same way as everyone else's houses. It might be somewhat less valuable, and I'm being a list. I'm putting myself in a lister's position here too. You know, as anything that's built in this town is about 20% to 50% more valuable than properties in other towns, not even ones that are not too far away. And so, you know, my issue here is that just a blanket, we're going to increase the population of the town, period, by a certain amount. That seems to be a really dangerous policy. Because what if no one wants to live here? Then what are we doing? You know, or, you know, there's nothing saying that this region's even going to continue to grow. You know, you can't just say we're going to increase the population of the town by some amount. It's not practical, and it's not realistic, because you can't control the growth of the area. This region has had its ups and downs historically. Even in the past, not quite 40 years that I've been here, it's had some serious ups and downs. So,
well,
you know,
I think just to answer that, at least from my point of view, Ernie, that would need to be on the table early in this discussion is what is the goal that we're putting on the table? Are we putting on the table to increase the housing stock in certain districts, or are we putting significant limitations on the type of housing stock that we're trying to encourage? But that would be on the table early.
So those are things like what I'm talking about.
Up first.
Bob?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we take the planning part of our title seriously, I just like to say that, I mean, we can say that, yes, growth will happen regardless. But if we want to kind of have any say in whether it's, you know, $3 million houses on 5 acres only, or we have existing building stock in the town, maybe some is underutilized. Are we not allowing for rentals to be in there because, you know, this is what I'm trying to understand, I guess, is mixed use not allowed in some buildings, and maybe it should be, so that we could have an office on the bottom, an apartment on the top, that kind of thing. That doesn't really change the character of the town too much, and there might be some low-hanging fruit in that area that I'd especially be interested in hearing. So, you know, along those lines, especially, you know, not new housing or anything like that. Just what can we do with what we've got already? I think doesn't change the character of the town. Doesn't change too much. May make it easier for some people that you know, work as nurses over at you know, across the river to live, that kind of thing.
Yeah, Jeff.
Yeah, and I want to. I agree with both Bob and Ernie. I want to qualify a couple things. So when we were going through this process of looking at the possibility of what happens on the Dyke property, you know, the question is, you know, are we going to do 100 units with 35 affordable or 7 McMansions? And we had a bunch of folks in the public side, we'd rather have 7 McMansions. So to your point, what is it we want to achieve? Having said that, I want to come back to what Ernie said, and this is a conversation I've been having with Jeff Lubell in a different way. I really like the notion of rezoning, creating new zoning districts, accommodating multifamily, higher densities, et cetera. But let's not give up the leverage with respect to affordability. So, and I'm speaking with respect to like Woodstock Community Trust, which essentially does its own thing. It does market rate and effectively to subsidize affordable housing. It's sort of self-contained to do that. So if we said, and I don't know what the number is, I'm just making something up. Ernie said 20%. So we said, okay, if you got a parcel where you can accommodate 5 units, hypothetically, one of them needs to be affordable. I don't know what the number is, if it's 5 to 2, you know, what the next threshold is. If it's, what I don't want to get into is restricting folks or preventing the possibility. But this is my bias. When I'm thinking about changing density and increasing density, I want to keep in mind, how do we leverage affordability as we're creating these zoning districts and thinking about our bylaws?
Yep. Good. So are people agree with that plan? We'll put some work in up front to get a detailed agenda. We'll invite the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, and we'll make this at least the first hour of our next meeting, which will be 3 weeks from now.
Yeah, and put on the listserv, we're gonna promote 10,000 units in Norwich and get all the public out we can. Let's just crank it up. Let's get people's input.
Yeah, we will be meeting. This is the last and final time you will get to put your input in before the high rise goes next to you. See if we get people out. Yeah.
Get them out.
Good strategy, Jeff. I think we should try that. Okay, thank you. The next one is more focused, and actually this has been on our list, and the listers begged us to put it back on again, very specifically to the topic of mergers or consolidations. There is a difference of opinion, I guess, on the table about whether or not a subdivision type permit is required to merge 2 lots that do not have, or at least one of which does not have a dwelling on it. And my understanding is that we need to clarify something to help the listers, and specific applicants have had confusion with this recently. And I know, Jeff, we had it kind of with our names associated with it a while back, and have parked it and not progressed it, but it sounded like there was some pretty straightforward language that we could propose that would, you know, it still have to go through the whole 9 yards of zoning revisions, but at least we would know what to put into that. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, so you actually spoke with Jack Cannon, as I recall. I didn't speak with him, but the notion that, you know, so two adjacent lots, how do you merge them effectively? One doesn't have a home on it. Why do you need DRB review? Can it be administrative? Isn't that the fundamental basis for this?
Yes.
So I think I just put the language that I wanted to put in the ordinance on the table.
But is there agreement that we need language in the ordinance? There isn't some other way of clarifying this? Ernie?
Well, the first thing is that people can and do by deed merge their properties. That's one thing. And in the case of what I've learned as a lister, I mean, I myself have changed deeds and stuff like that for people, and done that sort of thing, for other purposes outside this town. But it you know, having, you know, a person who buys 2 adjacent lots and wants to, let's say, put one of them into put most of their land in conservation, and they wanted to conserve the second lot too. The way assessing works in this town is every single separate lot is assessed what they call the first acre. Now, some of the lots are less than an acre, especially in the village and so on, and like on Kendall Station Road, they're less than an acre. But anything that's an acre, anything that's one lot is assessed basically a starting point of this flat rate that every single acre in the town is considered to have as a value. And if somebody who doesn't use, owns two adjacent lots, they get two separate, they get valued as two separate, they get twice the amount of, or more, every single individual lot gets a separate assessment, not a separate assessment, but a separate single first acre.
Yeah.
It's really expensive, real fast. It's reasonable if people's instinct is just simply merge the two in it by deed and get rid. And once you do that, automatically you get rid of the subdivision, because once you've gotten rid of a subdivision, either had it actually, I don't even know what the process is of going to the planning commission or to the DRB and saying, I want to undo the subdivision. All you have to do is let a subdivision expire. If you've got no, I'm sorry, forget that. That's not true. But I don't know, people just will merge them by getting a deed that says, I own this one and I own this one, and we're going to now have them under one single deed, on a single deed, and that gets rid of the extra first lot. And second, and whatever other number of lots that you may have and want to consolidate. And the reason really that the town doesn't have to have any dealings with those sorts of things is because when you've gotten rid of a second lot by making it unbuildable until you get it you get another permit and get it re-subdivided, you can't build. There's no more building, and there's no more subdivision until you again come to the town for a subdivision. So it becomes, there's some redundancy built into the system already. The biggest problem is that what doesn't happen is when somebody merges a property, no one notifies the listers. And that's why they're complaining, is because a subdivision, we get all the requests for subdivisions, so we can assess, we can find out who's, what lots have to be added, what first acres have to be added, and what, and all that sort of thing. But we don't get any information when they've undone it. And the only place to find it is a title search, which every year for every property have to do a title search, if that could possibly, there's no notification, no nothing. People don't even have to notify the town they've done this, because it just becomes automatic. So that's the problem that we're
Okay,
facing.
so Jeff, just
Complaining.
if you can help me, and it gets back to my same question, which is, do we need to change the bylaws to fix this problem? Is it, as Ernie said, there is a method, the deed route, we call it, to do it, but there is a notification logistics piece that isn't required, and therefore it doesn't happen sometimes, and it's a problem. Can we fix that in any other way other than changing bylaws? Jeff?
So I don't see the deed thing as a bylaw thing, as a zoning or subdivision thing, Jan. So my understanding of the state law is that you can merge two parcels, because in the merger of the two parcels, you're not changing any land use considerations. I want to come back and say something different. Having said that, my understanding is that when doing so, you have to create a deed that merges them. It has to be recorded with the town. To the extent it's recorded at the town level, I would say the procedural element is that deed should be provided to the listers as well, so they know what's going on. That's not a zoning subdivision or us issue. Rather, it's a procedural issue with the town clerk.
Right.
I want to explain something a little differently, in the sense that I haven't looked at this rule for some time, but the state says basically if you have two parcels and you want to do a boundary line adjustment, which in my opinion does conflict with our ordinance and subdivision, or zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations. I think it's a 10%, 15% or 20% change. So if you're adjusting one parcel by 15 or 20% or more, you can do that by notification to the state. Anything more than that, you've got to certify compliance of both parcels with respect to developability, which is something Ernie alluded to. So I don't mean to change topics, but the land use issue broadly is, if I'm changing boundary lines, how does it affect my ability to develop that parcel, which Ernie alluded to? If I'm combining two parcels and I've got one that I've developed on, I'm not changing the developability of that at all. So that's why it's exempt.
Right, right. So is it valid, and just to be specific about the question, and the listers are putting this out in, we can check with other applicants. It isn't just the listers that have complained, it's been specific applicants. But can this problem be solved by somehow forcing the procedural issue at the town clerk to listers level, and somehow throwing the massive weight of the planning commission behind that sort of effects? Ernie?
I'd suggest actually having the select board make it a town bylaw. And that way it's that simple. I mean, the town manager would, maybe work up a specific procedure, how she'll receive it and all that sort of stuff, but just simply say that every single merger of lots is got to, the listers have to be notified.
That's not a town manager issue. It's really not. I think so. The question is, who does the town clerk?
But is it valid to say a select board bylaw could be used to require it? What would bind the town clerk to do what we want done?
Bylaws.
What else?
But what does the law say with respect to town clerk responsibilities? I don't know that.
Okay.
If I were the town clerk, I would be willing to say, hey, golly shucks, to the extent there's a deed that I'm recording, here's a copy for you.
Have the listers had that conversation with the town clerk?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I keep on being the person who gets asked about it, so.
I drink the water.
I think it's a good idea to talk to her. Adding more workload to her. I don't know, the listers are not in a position to be adding a workload to the town clerk. I think the only people that can add a workload issue to the clerk is either the state or the select board, depending on if the select board is allowed to add new duties to the clerk. And I suspect
or theoretically the clerk takes it on of their own discretion.
Well, the thing is that you can understand why the clerk might want to be held responsible for that particular issue. I mean, she's not going to benefit, her office doesn't benefit from it at all, other than she becomes a courier. When somebody brings in a deed where there's been a merger, now she's got an extra steps that she had to do besides recording it. She has to make sure it also, goes to the listers. And I mean, I'm not saying that any town clerk that I'm familiar with would object to doing that one step, but I don't want to be presumptuous either and assume that every possible. Have I been saying town clerk, or have I been saying town manager?
Town
Single.
clerk.
Okay,
Yeah, I think so. I guess what I would propose, the simplest starting point, it sounds like, would be for the listers to make a formal request.
Yes.
I do not want to change bylaws for something that can be fixed in a much more obvious.
I agree, but no one thought of I don't think anyone's thought of just asking the town clerk to do something like that.
So I guess I would propose that the list.
There's only two of us right now doing all the heavy lifting, and we just got finished just doing the grand list, which is a gargantuan.
Right. So can we, as the planning, we can either wait and let you guys do round one, and then we'll throw our muscle behind it, or we can just say now in our in our minutes, say that we've discussed this, and as far as we can tell, we would support a Lister request to solve this problem at a town clerk procedural level, and we would welcome feedback from the town clerk.
Well, I would also add, and that the planning commission suggests or requests, whichever word you want to use, that the listers talk to the town manager and see where that goes first, and then then conversation among the departments about what to do.
Yeah, if we need to ratchet it up to,
Right.
we want to formally support it, or we want to ask the select board to do a bylaws thing, but let's start with the easiest, which is the obvious party that would benefit from it, asking for help and seeing if that goes. So, I mean, I think Vince right now, if that's in the minutes, then that's sufficient in the sense that the listers could reference it. The listers could say, as discussed in the planning commission on this date, there was support in the group for this request, and then we'll take it from there. After
Even
you,
Yeah,
the listers don't necessarily read the minutes of
half of the listers are going to read them for
yeah,
sure.
but I'd like to make a motion that the town components communicate with one another. How about that?
I think that's a good idea.
That's a great
Is there a
idea.
second?
Second the
I'm
motion.
not sure it's within our power to wave a magic wand and have that happen, but I would wholeheartedly support it.
Well,
Um,
it's a matter of just a letter asking, will you do this, please? And if they don't, then you know, because
So
somebody's going
you
to be.
you can reference these minutes to say this group supports that request, and then if that takes a more formal thing, then we can put it back on the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're hoping I'll remember this the next time I am in the list.
No, Vince has got it captured in pithy prose.
Extra.
Okay.
You guys are good for me.
Yeah.
Put the lister's office on the list of people who received the minutes.
Yeah, we can.
I'll put a sticky note on your desk in 5 minutes.
Yes.
There you go.
I don't have a desk.
Oh, you don't have it? Oh. all
Your
right.
door.
No,
On
no,
the
I do
door.
not.
So how about when we receive the minutes, we all email Ernie saying, read the minutes. Yes.
It is perfectly legitimate. Vince, if you could just make a note or just call Pam up when you submit the minutes, say, hey, Pam, send a copy to the listers. And then Pam Mullen is perfectly capable of doing that administrative task for us. Okay. Now, I hesitate to open up a topic like capital planning this late in the evening, unless people have a sort of a starting point set of thoughts that are worth talking about for 5 minutes. Jeff?
Yeah, just quickly, I mean, if we had 3 people like the solar working group.
Thank you.
I don't care whatever the proper words are. I don't care. It doesn't matter if it's 4 people. It doesn't matter if it's a whole commission. But I just soon meet for an hour with a couple other folks to talk about this, or the whole commission for that matter.
Okay.
Well, you
So-
can talk to each of us alone, and you don't have to worry about an open meeting law issue.
No, I'd like to do it as I mean, Vince and I were talking about involving others. I don't have any problem, you know. So if we said someday at this time, just another meeting for an hour,
Yeah.
start it up.
Well, what if I mean, I'm looking at our current agenda, and I'm hoping to knock off, well, if we take the subcommittee process that we had, okay, I think we've turned a corner on that. We've got a working way to do it. I would like us to think that we can take on a couple pithy topics. Solar siting is separate. If the other 2 that we're working on are affordable housing and capital planning, then let's, put that front and center on the table of this group And so that's the second half of the next meeting is capital plan. And then if we say, okay, we need a working group for this because we want 3-4 people to focus more, get another meeting in, fine. But do we need to do that before the next meeting, I guess is my question. Jeff?
No, John, I would say you've got the item already under item, 6 on my agenda, zoning with to support housing.
Yeah.
Not affordable housing, but generic, as you've said, and then capital planning. So I support what you just said in that context.
Okay, so we will have a considerably shorter agenda for the next meeting that will have a couple of big block items. And I will do my best. If I have other things tagged with agenda item, I will not pig pile them on next meetings. I'll leave it open for those 2 blocks. And we'll see if we can make some headway. All right. Great.
But yeah, and I'll,
Go ahead.
before we
Bob.
move on, from it, I guess my concern is though that with, I mean, not to go back too much to the subcommittee process, but I mean, I'm not sure what exactly precipitated the new take on subcommittees. I assume there's something specific that I'm not aware of that led to the reread. But it feels like we're kind of hamstrung a bit now. When we had talked about this a few months ago, there was, a interest and engagement from the select board. We would include the town manager because it's something that's, mandated that the town should be doing, the planning. We see it in meetings all the time that like, I keep thinking of some of the meetings that I've watched where it's like, well, how can we consider this when we don't have a heating system for Tracy Hall yet? And that's, sort of been the, we are not going to walk and chew gum at the same time approach. That I mean, if I wouldn't want to go down the path of setting up what we will do too much if we know that we've got to go a route that has more buy-in. And if that's why I was kind of curious of what route we would take. If to get buy-in, we have to kick it over to the select board and have them take ownership of something that we're supposed to be doing because they don't want us to do it, then it just gets a little more, you immediately see the inefficiency that they seem to have bought into, I guess.
Yeah, well, let me try this for a minute because I think there's a way to do this constructively, especially if the select board kind of has also turned the corner on some of these subcommittee things. I would argue that there's a Venn diagram here where there is an element of capital planning that at least starts or is the purview of the planning commission. What are the, somebody said it in a previous meeting, what are the elements of the town plan that have capital or are capital heavy, transportation and housing and infrastructure and so forth. And clearly the planning commission is involved in framing those and planning for those. That then fits into a bigger Venn diagram circle of all other things going on in the town, and that involves select board and town staff. So I think we can start on our piece. There's no reason we can't have very constructive conversations about capital planning in this group or some subset of this group. And then it may be pretty soon into that where we say, this will make sense as an adjunct or a subset of a bigger town conversation. Hey, select board, we've started this. Can you put it in context and make a bigger group? But we would still be doing our work and feeding it into that bigger group. But does that make sense? That's kind of the way I'm thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess I wouldn't have thought of it before of, the concerns about like, they don't want to just, do something that is a project on the side that then gets ignored. I'm all for doing the work and getting done what is required by the state to be done. Yeah, I mean, I'm all for that. Yes, I guess if that's the path to getting the buy-in and getting the attention and moving the
Yeah.
planning and all that forward, then no.
Okay.
Yeah,
Jeff,
don't want to belabor it too much, but yeah.
Yeah, so I was at the town of Enfield Select Board meeting last night presenting a byway project. It's a mile long shared use path. And just took note of one of the agenda items, which was, hey, we're going to do our capital improvement meeting on the following date. So it's a town-wide effort. And what I see in local towns outside of Norwich is that to varying degrees, Hanover, Lebanon, Enfield, Hartford, et cetera, have a process by which staff has a role, the town manager, city manager has a role. Each of the planning boards or planning commissions has a role, and there's a concerted effort to do that. And I'm not going to opine until the camera's off why Norwich doesn't do that. But to me, it would benefit Norwich greatly because there's a lot of work that could be done to benefit staff in terms of effort, select board in terms of transparency and accountability. So to me, this is a no-brainer.
Yep. And I certainly, if I jump back 3-4 months ago, I met with Pam Smith and there was a clear desire from her point of view to have the select board and town staff work on this. And then we got sidetracked by the, who sets up subcommittees, and we didn't want to throw a group into a hornet's nest until that was worked out. I think we can get past that. And so I'm hopeful that she can push the select board to work in this direction. And then we pull town staff and then to the degree that we want town residents to be members, okay, the select board can appoint members to a capital planning commission. Great. And it doesn't get anybody's undies in a bunch about who's appointing members, and we can get it to work. Okay, so Ernie?
I just wanted to say that, I hope your list of what goes into capital planning was not exhaustive, because I was going to say even conservation issue matters, all the things that we deal with, anything that's in the town plan has something to do, it affects and is affected by capital planning. So, even things where even zoning will affect capital planning in that, values for properties and so on and so forth are affected by that. At the very least, that would be how it's affected. So,
right.
Everything,
so we need to bound it to as with any of these things, we need to sensibly bound it to have a chance of success, but it needs to have the right things on the table. Okay. All right. So that's a plan for the next meeting. That'll be a fun working session. Let's jump to the minutes. If somebody wants to propose approval, I had a couple changes, but we can get the motion on the table.
Motion to approve.
second,
So that's 7-9.
Yes.
My comments were specifically on number 2, Vince. It said, happy to see members of the PC at the PUC site walkthrough. That implies plural members. I believe I was the only one there.
Okay.
So a member or the chair, however you want to put it, but to be accurate. And then number 4 was not PC goals and priorities as a title. That was the chair report
Okay.
that had those miscellaneous items.
Yeah, under that one, Jan, Vince, in the first paragraph, bottom line, it says have hybrids, change to hybrid meetings.
Okay.
Just one little typo there.
Okay. We don't have hybrids.
Hybrids.
Hubris.
Sounds like there's hubris and then
And then it's there.
video game. The only other one I saw was in 5 under subcommittee process. It said suggest modifying the bylaws, and it didn't say whose bylaws. But at this point, I think we're past that, and it's it's accurate enough, and that is what we talked about, so you can leave that one. Any other edits, changes, thoughts on the minutes? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes of 7-9 as amended?
Aye.
I,
Thank you.
Bob abstained, you said?
Yeah. I would-
Okay, sorry.
Bob abstained, so 4-1 on that, passed, and public comment, given that unless somebody's hiding around the corner, there's nobody on Zoom with the ability or desire to speak, so
Motion to adjourn.
I'll take a motion to adjourn, I'll take a second.
second,
All those in favor of that motion?
Aye.
All right, let's plan on 3 weeks, regular second Tuesday, and we'll dig into 2 topics. And I will invite the Affordable Housing Subcommittee to the first hour.
Great.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
I.